11 months had passed since this mansion last heard the sound of children laughing. 11 months since leukemia stole the hair, the smiles, and the hope of two little twin girls. Their father, the most feared mafia boss in Chicago, a man who made the entire underworld tremble, had spent millions on the best doctors in the world. But money could not buy miracles. Power could not threaten death. Until a woman walked through the door. She carried no medicine, no medical equipment. She carried the scars of a trafficking past, the grief of a mother who had buried her own son, and a single promise: I will not let them die alone. She did not know that promise would change everything. Two children waiting to die, a crime lord who had forgotten how to love, and her own shattered heart. Dominic Castellano stood in the doorway of the medical wing, his massive frame frozen like a statue carved from stone. The room before him had once been a guest suite filled with laughter and sunlight. Now it was a hospital ward, 2 small beds, 2 fragile bodies, 2 daughters slipping away from him one breath at a time. The monitors beeped in a steady, merciless rhythm. IV tubes snaked into tiny arms covered with bruises from too many needles. The smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air, mixing with something else, something that smelled like the end. Lucia lay closest to the window, her eyes closed, her chest rising and falling in shallow movements. At 6 years old, she had always been the brave one, the protector of her younger twin. But bravery meant nothing against the disease eating her from the inside. Sophia lay in the other bed, clutching a worn teddy bear named Bella. It had been a gift from their mother, the last gift before Isabella died 3 years ago on a snow-covered highway, her body wrapped around her daughters to shield them from the crash that should have killed them all. Doctor. Catherine Shaw had left just minutes ago. Her words still echoed in the silence. 2 to 3 weeks, Mr. Castellano. I am truly sorry. We have exhausted every option. Dominic's hands curled into fists at his sides. 2 to 3 weeks, 14 to 21 days. That was all the time his daughters had left. All the money in his empire, all the fear he commanded, all the blood on his hands, none of it could buy them a single extra heartbeat. He remembered Isabella's face in those final moments at the hospital, her fingers weak but desperate as they gripped his hand. Promise me, she had whispered. Promise me you will protect them. No matter what. Promise me, Dominic. I promise, he had said. I swear on my life. But he had failed. He was failing right now, standing in this doorway like a coward while his daughters lay dying 10 feet away. Sophia's eyes fluttered open. Even from across the room, he could see how dull they had become. Once bright and full of mischief, now they held only exhaustion and something worse, acceptance. Daddy? Her voice was barely a whisper. Daddy, can you hold me? Dominic's chest seized. He wanted to move. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to walk to her bed, to gather her in his arms, to tell her everything would be okay. But his feet would not obey, because holding her meant feeling how light she had become. Holding her meant acknowledging that soon there would be nothing left to hold. Daddy? Sophia called again, her voice cracking. Dominic turned away. He could not look at her. He could not face the disappointment in her eyes as he walked out of the room, his footsteps heavy on the marble floor. In the darkness of the hallway, away from the monitors and the machines and the smell of death, Dominic Castellano pressed his forehead against the cold wall. His shoulders shook, his jaw clenched so tight he thought his teeth might crack. The most feared man in Chicago wanted to cry, but the tears would not come. He had forgotten how. He did not know that tomorrow, everything would change. A woman would walk through his door. A woman who had lost everything but still carried enough hope to share. And she would do what millions of dollars and the best doctors in the world could not. She would teach a monster how to love again. Before it was too late. The alarm never rang. Elena Vasquez did not need one. Her body had learned to wake at 4 a.m, trained by years of survival and double shifts. She opened her eyes in the darkness of her studio apartment on the south side of Chicago. The room was barely bigger than a closet. Mold crept across the walls. A cockroach scurried into a crack near the kitchenette. Before she rose, she turned to the nightstand. There, in a small wooden frame, was the photograph. A little boy with dark curls and a smile that could light up any room. Marco, her son, her everything. 2 years now. My baby, Elena whispered. Mama still misses you every day. The memory came without warning. Marco in her arms, so light, so fragile, his small hand reaching up to touch her face. Mama, I am so sleepy. Those were his last words. He was 4 years old. Elena forced the tears back. Crying would not bring him back. Crying would not pay rent or send money to Diego in Mexico. She walked to her closet. 3 worn shirts, 2 faded pants. shoes with cardboard stuffed inside to cover the holes. Today was different. Today was an interview. She read the crumpled paper again. Caregiver needed for children. High salary. Location. Northbrook Estate. She did not know what family lived there. She did not care. The landlord had slipped 2 eviction notices under her door. Diego's tuition was due next month. She thought of her brother's voice on the phone last week. I am going to become a doctor, Elena. I will save children like Marco. Diego was 19. Brilliant. The only hope she had left. She had sacrificed everything to get him out of Mexico, away from the poverty that swallowed their childhood. Elena stepped before the cracked mirror. The woman staring back looked older than 27, and there, beneath her sleeve, the scar, long, jagged, running from wrist to elbow, a reminder of 2 years in hell, 2 years after her father sold her to traffickers at 14. She pulled her sleeve down quickly. Today is a new day, she whispered. Today will be different. Elena stepped into the freezing Chicago morning. She did not know that behind those mansion gates, 2 little girls were waiting for someone exactly like her, and a man drowning in darkness was about to meet the only person who could save him. Elena stood before the iron gates, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. The gates rose 10 feet high, topped with security cameras that swiveled slowly, watching everything. 2 men in black suits flanked the entrance. They were not ordinary security guards. Their eyes were cold, calculating. Bulges beneath their jackets suggested weapons. Everything about this place screamed danger. Elena's instincts told her to turn around, to walk away, to find another job, any other job. But the eviction notice in her pocket reminded her she had no choice. One of the guards stepped forward. He looked her up and down, his expression unreadable. Elena Vasquez? Yes. Follow me. The gates opened with a mechanical groan, and Elena stepped through. The driveway stretched endlessly before her, lined with bare trees that looked like skeletal hands reaching toward the gray sky. The mansion itself was enormous. 3 stories of stone and glass, more like a fortress than a home. Gardens surrounded the property, but nothing bloomed. Everything was dead or dormant, trapped in an endless winter. But it was not the cold that made Elena shiver. It was the silence. No birds singing, no distant laughter, no signs of life at all. The air itself felt heavy, thick with something Elena recognized all too well. Grief. This house was grieving. The front door opened before she reached it. A woman stood in the entrance, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was in her early 60s, dressed in simple black. Her eyes carried a sadness that seemed permanent. You must be Elena. Her voice was tired but kind. I am Mrs. Romano, the head housekeeper. Elena nodded. Thank you for the opportunity to interview. Mrs. Romano studied her for a long moment, then sighed. You are the 15th person to interview this month. No one has lasted more than 3 days. Elena frowned. Why? The older woman did not answer immediately. She glanced back into the darkness of the house, as if checking that no one was listening. Because this house is waiting to die, she finally said, and no one wants to stand beside death. A chill ran down Elena's spine, but she did not move. She did not run. I have stood beside death before, Elena said quietly. I am not afraid. Mrs. Romano's eyes widened slightly. Something shifted in her expression. Hope, perhaps, or recognition. You have lost someone. It was not a question. My son, Elena replied. 2 years ago. Mrs. Romano inhaled sharply. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then the housekeeper reached out and took Elena's hand. Her grip was warm, gentle. Perhaps you are the one we have been looking for, she whispered. But first, you must meet the master of the house. She led Elena inside. The hallway stretched before them, swallowed in shadows. Heavy curtains blocked every window. Not a single ray of light penetrated the darkness. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floor as they walked deeper into the mansion. Who is he? Elena asked. The master? Mrs. Romano stopped before a massive oak door. She turned to Elena, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. Dominic Castellano. They call him the Shadow of Chicago. She paused. And you would do well not to anger him. The door swung open. Elena stepped inside and came face to face with the most terrifying man she had ever seen. The office was dark. Heavy curtains blocked what little light remained in the gray afternoon sky. The air smelled of expensive cigars and whiskey, a scent that clung to the leather furniture and oak-paneled walls. Elena's eyes adjusted slowly to the shadows. She could make out a massive desk near the window. Behind it sat a figure, his back turned to her, staring out at nothing. Sit down. The voice was ice. No greeting, no warmth, just a command. Elena walked to the chair in front of the desk and sat. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but she kept her face calm. She had survived worse than a rich man's intimidation tactics. For a long moment, Dominic Castellano did not move. He remained facing the window, his broad shoulders rigid beneath his tailored suit. Then he turned. Elena had expected someone frightening. She had not expected this. Dominic was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair and a jawline that could have been carved from marble. He was handsome in the way that dangerous things were beautiful. A wolf, a storm, something that could destroy you while you admired it. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Dark, empty, eyes that had seen too much death and felt nothing anymore. He sat down across from her and opened a thin folder. Elena Vasquez, 27 years old, no medical degree, no experience with critically ill children. He looked up, his gaze cold. Why should I hire you? Elena met his stare without flinching. Because I have something no degree can teach. And what is that? I know what it feels like to sit beside your child, counting every breath, praying for a miracle that never comes. The air in the room shifted. Dominic's jaw tightened. His fingers stopped moving on the folder. Elena continued, her voice steady. My son, Marco, 4 years old, leukemia, 14 months of fighting. I was there from the first diagnosis to the last breath. I held him when he died. Silence. The kind of silence that pressed against the walls and squeezed the air from the room. Dominic stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to her once more. Why would you want this job? His voice was rough. Why would you want to care for dying children after losing your own? Elena rose from her chair. Because the night Marco died, I made him a promise. I told him I would never let another child die alone. Never again. Dominic did not move. His shoulders rose and fell with a single deep breath. When he finally turned around, his expression was unreadable. But something had shifted in his eyes, a crack in the ice. 1 week, he said. You have 1 week to prove yourself. If you upset my daughters in any way, you will disappear. Do you understand? I understand. Elena paused at the door. But Mr. Castellano, what? Your daughters do not need another person around them who is afraid. They need someone who believes that tomorrow is still worth living for. Dominic said nothing. He simply nodded toward the door. Elena walked out, her heart still pounding. But as she crossed the threshold, she glanced back. The anger she had expected was not there. Instead, she saw something else. Pain, perhaps. Or hope. Or maybe just the surprise of a man who had finally met someone unafraid to speak the truth to his face. Masseuse. Romano led Elena down a long corridor on the second floor. Their footsteps echoed against the marble, the only sound in the suffocating silence. The girls are in here. Mrs. Romano said, stopping before a white door. Prepare yourself. She opened the door, and Elena stepped inside. The room was large but felt like a tomb. Heavy curtains blocked every window, sealing out the world. The smell of antiseptic burned Elena's nostrils. Monitors beeped in a steady, lifeless rhythm. IV stands stood like metal sentinels beside 2 hospital beds, and in those beds lay 2 small figures. Lucia was closest to the door, 6 years old, but she looked younger. Her skin was pale as paper, stretched thin over fragile bones. Her head was bald, smooth as a stone. She lay motionless, eyes closed, barely breathing. Sophia lay in the other bed, clutching a worn teddy bear to her chest. Her eyes were open, but there was nothing behind them. No spark, no curiosity, just the hollow stare of a child who had already given up. Elena's heart cracked. She walked slowly to Sophia's bedside and knelt down until their eyes were level. "Hello, sweetheart," she said softly. "My name is Elena." Sophia looked at her for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice flat. "You will leave too, like everyone else. Why do you think that?" "Because everyone leaves." Sophia's grip tightened on her teddy bear. "They look at us, then they cry, then they go away." Elena reached out and took Sophia's hand. It was tiny, cold, like holding a small bird that had forgotten how to fly. "I will not cry," Elena said, "and I am not going anywhere." From the other bed, Lucia's eyes opened. She turned her head slowly, watching Elena with suspicion. "Do you promise?" Elena looked at the older twin. Even sick, even exhausted, Lucia had the eyes of a protector, a child who had been forced to grow up too fast. "I promise," Elena said. "Mama promised too." Lucia's voice cracked. Then she died. The words cut through Elena like a blade. For a moment, she could not breathe. She saw Marco's face, heard his last words, felt his small body go still in her arms, but she did not look away. Your mama did not want to leave you, Elena said gently. I am sure of that. How do you know? Because I am a mother too, and no mother ever wants to leave her children. Ever. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Her lower lip trembled. I miss her, she whispered. I miss Mama so much. Elena climbed onto the bed and pulled the little girl into her arms. Sophia buried her face against Elena's shoulder and began to cry. Not the quiet, hopeless tears of a dying child, real tears, the kind that cleansed. Lucia watched them for a moment. Then slowly, painfully, she crawled out of her bed and crossed to her sister's side. She pressed herself against Elena's other arm, 3 broken souls holding each other in the darkness. Elena began to hum softly, a lullaby her grandmother used to sing in Mexico, long ago, before the world turned cruel. Outside the door, hidden in the shadows of the hallway, Dominic stood watching. He saw Elena rocking his daughters gently. He heard Sophia's cries slowly fade into hiccups, then into silence. He watched Lucia's rigid body finally relax. For 11 months, he had tried everything. Money, doctors, specialists. Nothing had worked, and now a stranger with nothing but a promise had done what he could not. Dominic did not know whether to feel grateful or ashamed. All he knew was that for the first time since Isabella died, his daughters were not crying from fear. They were crying because someone was finally there to hold them. Elena arrived at the mansion before dawn. The security guards recognized her now and waved her through without question. She climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, her footsteps quick and purposeful. When she reached the girl's room, she paused at the door. The same suffocating darkness waited inside, the same stale air, the same beeping monitors counting down the seconds. Not anymore. Elena walked straight to the windows and grabbed the heavy curtains. What are you doing? The night nurse jumped from her chair. Elena pulled the curtains open. Sunlight poured into the room for the first time in months. Golden, warm, alive. Stop! The nurse rushed toward her. The doctor said they need rest. You cannot do this. Elena turned to face her calmly. Rest does not mean living in darkness. Lucia groaned, covering her eyes with her thin arm. It is too bright. Yes, sweetheart. Elena knelt beside her bed. This is the sun. Do you remember the sun? Lucia peeked through her fingers. The light caught her pale face, and for a moment, she almost looked like a normal child waking up on a normal morning. Sophia squinted toward the window, her teddy bear clutched against her chest. It is beautiful, she whispered. Elena smiled. She reached into the bag she had brought and pulled out a small bouquet of yellow flowers, daisies, simple but bright. She placed them in a glass of water on the table between the 2 beds. Lucia stared at them. Why are there flowers? What do you mean? Flowers are for funerals. The words hit Elena like a punch, but she kept her voice steady. Flowers are everywhere, sweetheart. They are not just for sad times. They are here to remind us that the world is still beautiful. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to her music. Soft guitar filled the room, a gentle melody that wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Then Elena sat on the edge of Sophia's bed and began to tell a story. It was a tale her grandmother used to tell in Mexico, about a brave princess who faced a dragon alone because everyone else was too afraid, about a poor boy who searched the whole world for treasure, only to discover it had been in his own heart all along. Sophia's eyes widened. What happened next? Then what? Lucia asked, forgetting to sound tired. Elena kept going, changing her voice for each character. She growled like the dragon. She squeaked like the tiny mouse who helped the princess. She made the girls guess what would happen next. And then something miraculous occurred. Sophia giggled. It was small, barely more than a breath, but it was real. Lucia tried to hide her smile, but she could not. Outside the door, Mrs. Romano stood frozen. Her hand covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. Vince walked past, then stopped when he saw her. Are you crying? No, Mrs. Romano wiped her face quickly, dust in my eyes. Vince looked through the doorway. Inside, Elena was making a ridiculous dragon face, her arms raised like claws. The girls were laughing. Actually laughing. Who is she? Vince asked. Mrs. Romano watched Elena gather both girls into a hug. Perhaps the miracle we have been waiting for. That evening, Dominic sat alone in his office, staring at the security monitor on his desk. He had replayed the footage 3 times already. His daughters were laughing. For the first time in 11 months, Lucia was smiling. Sophia was clapping her tiny hands. And Elena was there, holding them, singing softly as they drifted off to sleep. Dominic zoomed in on her face. She looked exhausted but peaceful. like someone who had found exactly where she was meant to be. Something stirred in his chest, something sharp and unfamiliar. He had thought that part of him died with Isabella. Perhaps he had been wrong. On the third day, Dominic decided to check on his daughters himself. He had been watching Elena through the security cameras, watching her open curtains, bring flowers, tell stories, watching his daughters smile for the first time in nearly a year. But something was wrong. He heard laughter as he approached the room, then Sophia's voice, curious and light. "Is this Mama? Miss Elena?" Dominic froze in the doorway. Elena sat between the two beds, holding a leather photo album. His photo album, the one he had locked away in his study after Isabella died. "Yes, sweetheart," Elena said softly. "That is your Mama. She was so beautiful." Sophia traced her tiny finger across the photograph. "She looks like an angel." "She was," Lucia whispered. "I remember. A little." Dominic's blood turned to ice. "Who gave you permission to take that?" His voice cut through the room like a blade. Both girls flinched. Elena looked up, her expression calm but wary. "Mr. Castellano, answer me." He stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Who told you that you could touch my private belongings?" Elena rose slowly, placing herself between Dominic and the children. "Lucia asked about her mother. She said she was starting to forget her face. That is not your concern." "Then whose concern is it?" Elena's voice remained steady. "Yours? When was the last time you talked to them about their mother? When was the last time you even said her name?" The air between them crackled with tension. Lucia began to cry. "Daddy, please do not yell at Miss Elena." Sophia clutched Bella to her chest, trembling. Dominic saw the fear in their eyes. Fear of him, their own father. Something cracked inside his chest. Elena lowered her voice, but her words carried the weight of truth. "Mr. Castellano, I understand you are in pain, but hiding from it does not help your daughters. It only makes them feel more alone. You know nothing about me. I know you are afraid." Elena took a step closer. "I was afraid too, so afraid of losing my son that I could barely hold him in his final days. I kept my distance because I thought it would hurt less." She paused, her eyes glistening. "It did not. It only gave me more regrets." Dominic's jaw tightened until it ached. "Your daughters need you," Elena continued. "Not your money, not your doctors. Just you, present, here, before it is too late." He could not speak, could not move, so he did what he always did. He turned and walked away. But that night, Dominic did not go to his office. He did not pour himself whiskey or stare at financial reports he did not care about. Instead, he sat in the hallway outside his daughter's room, his back against the cold wall, his eyes fixed on the door. Through the gap beneath it, he could hear Elena's voice, soft, gentle, singing a lullaby in Spanish. He did not understand the words, but he understood the feeling. Safety, love, the promise that someone would be there when you woke up. Isabella used to sing to them like that. Dominic pressed his palms against his eyes. Elena was right. He had been running for 3 years, running from grief, running from his daughters, running from the memory of the woman he had failed to protect, and his children were paying the price. At 2 a.m, Mrs. Romano found him still sitting there. "You are not sleeping?" she asked quietly. Dominic did not look at her. His eyes remained on the door. "Do you think she is right?" His voice was hoarse. "That I have failed them?" Mrs. Romano lowered herself onto the floor beside him, her old bones creaking in protest. "I think it is not too late to start again," she said softly. "It is never too late." The next morning, Dominic sat in his office, unable to focus on anything. Elena's words kept echoing in his mind. Her calm defiance, her refusal to back down. Who was this woman who dared to speak to him like that? He picked up his phone and called Vince. "I need you to find everything about Elena Vasquez. Everything." There was a pause on the other end. "Boss, she is just a caregiver. Do it." 2 days later, Vince walked into Dominic's office carrying a thin folder. His face was pale. His usual confidence was gone. "Boss." He placed the folder on the desk. "She has been through hell." Dominic opened the folder and began to read. Elena Maria Vasquez, born in Guadalajara, Mexico. Mother died giving birth to her younger brother Diego. Father became an alcoholic, abusive, violent. Dominic turned the page. At 14 years old, Elena's father sold her to human traffickers for drug money. 2 years. She spent 2 years in their hands. The scar on her arm, Dominic remembered seeing it when she rolled up her sleeves to wash dishes. Long, jagged. Now he knew where it came from. Her first escape attempt. They caught her. They made sure she would never forget. At 16, police raided the trafficking ring. Elena was rescued and placed in a refugee shelter. She spent 3 years there, learning English, finishing school, fighting to survive. At 20, she met Miguel Vasquez, a construction worker, a good man. They married within a year. At 22, she gave birth to Marco. Dominic's hands tightened on the paper. At 24, Miguel died in a construction accident. The company denied responsibility. No compensation, no justice. At 25, Marco was diagnosed with leukemia. 14 months later, he died in her arms. The final note in the file was clinical, cold. Due to injuries sustained during trafficking, Elena Vasquez is unable to have more children. Dominic set the folder down. His hands were trembling. She lost everything, he said quietly, over and over again. Vince nodded. And she still comes here every day, smiling at your daughters like she has not been destroyed by this world. Dominic thought about Elena's eyes when she spoke about Marco. There had been no bitterness, no anger at the universe for taking everything from her, only love, and a pain she had learned to carry. She is stronger than me, Dominic whispered. Vince was quiet for a moment. Maybe, boss. Or maybe she just never had the choice to stop moving forward. That night, Dominic found himself standing outside the medical wing again. The door was slightly open. Through the gap, he could see Elena sitting on Sophia's bed. His younger daughter was curled against her, eyes half closed. Elena was humming softly, stroking Sophia's head with gentle fingers. "Sleep well, sweetheart," she whispered. "I am not going anywhere." Sophia's breathing slowed. Her small body relaxed. For once, she looked peaceful. Dominic watched from the shadows, unable to move. This woman had nothing. No money, no power, no family left except a brother she was working herself to death to support. But she had something he had lost the day Isabella died, the courage to love even when it meant risking everything, the strength to stay present even when death was waiting in the room. Dominic leaned his head against the wall and closed his eyes. He had built an empire on fear. He had made grown men tremble at the mention of his name. He controlled half of Chicago's underworld. But this woman, this broken, scarred, penniless woman, was braver than he would ever be, and for the first time in 3 years, Dominic Castellano felt ashamed of the man he had become. The next morning, Dominic did something he had not done in 11 months. He walked into his daughter's room, not to check on medical reports, not to speak with doctors, but to stay. Lucia saw him first. Her eyes widened with surprise. "Daddy," she pushed herself up against her pillows. "You are here early." Dominic stood in the doorway, suddenly unsure. The room felt different now. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Fresh flowers sat on the nightstand. It almost felt like a place where life could exist. "I wanted to be with you," he said quietly. "Both of you." He walked to the chair between the beds and sat down. His hands rested on his knees. Awkward and stiff, he had commanded rooms full of dangerous men without flinching. But sitting with his own daughters terrified him. Sophia watched him with cautious eyes. "Daddy, can you tell stories like Miss Elena?" Dominic's chest tightened. He glanced at Elena, who stood near the window. I do not know how to tell stories." Elena stepped closer, her voice gentle. "You could tell them about their mother. Happy memories." The words hung in the air. Dominic had not spoken about Isabella since the funeral. Her name had become forbidden in this house, locked away with the photo albums and the wedding rings. But his daughters were looking at him with such hope. He took a breath. "Your mama," his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Your mama loved to sing. She sang every single day." Lucia tilted her head. "Was she good?" Dominic laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse. "No, she was terrible. The worst singer I ever heard." Both girls giggled. "But she did not care," Dominic continued. "She sang in the shower. She sang while cooking. She sang lullabies that made the neighbors complain." "You sing bad too, Daddy," Lucia said, grinning. "I know. I learned from her." Sophia crawled across her bed and climbed into Dominic's lap. He froze for a moment, then wrapped his arms around her. She was so light, so fragile, but warm, alive. Lucia reached out and took his hand. For the first time in 3 years, Dominic held his daughters. Really held them. Not checking for fevers. Not counting heartbeats. Just holding them because they were his children and he loved them. Elena quietly slipped out of the room. In the hallway, Mrs. Romano was waiting. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. "I thought I would never see this again," she whispered. Elena smiled softly. "He just needed someone to remind him. You did what no one else could. I only did what I wish someone had done for me." That evening, Dominic found Elena in the kitchen. She was washing dishes, her sleeves rolled up, the scar on her arm visible under the fluorescent light. She did not hear him approach. "Thank you." Elena turned, startled. Water dripped from her hands onto the floor. "For what?" Dominic stepped closer. His voice was rough, like the words were being pulled from somewhere deep. "For not giving up on me, even when I treated you badly." Elena dried her hands on a towel, her expression unreadable. "I do not give up on people, Mr. Castellano. That is why I am still here." She turned to leave, but Dominic reached out and caught her hand. Elena stopped. She looked down at his fingers wrapped around hers, then up at his face. "Dominic," he said quietly. "Call me Dominic." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Elena nodded slowly. "Dominic." And for the first time, she saw something different in his eyes. Not the cold emptiness of a crime lord, not the distant grief of a broken father. Something human, something almost like hope. Dr. Catherine Shaw arrived for her weekly examination on a gray Tuesday morning. She had been treating the Castellano twins for 11 months. She had watched them deteriorate week after week. She had prepared herself to deliver the final news. But today, something was different. The curtains were open. Sunlight filled the room. Fresh flowers sat on the nightstand. And the girls were awake, talking softly with Elena about a princess who defeated a dragon. Dr. Shaw set down her medical bag and approached Lucia's bed first. "Good morning, sweetheart. Let me check on you." She placed her stethoscope against Lucia's chest, listened, frowned, listened again. She checked the monitors, reviewed the overnight data. Her frown deepened. Moving to Sophia's bed, she repeated the examination. Temperature, blood pressure, heart rate. She pulled out her tablet and compared the numbers to last week's readings. Then she checked them again. "This is impossible." Dominic stepped forward, fear gripping his chest. "What is it? What is wrong, doctor?" Shaw looked up at him, her face pale with confusion. "Their numbers are improving." "Improving?" Dominic could barely breathe. "What do you mean improving?" "White blood cell counts are stabilizing. The cancer markers are decreasing. Their vitals are stronger than they have been in months." She shook her head slowly. This should not be happening, not without aggressive treatment. She turned to Elena, who stood quietly in the corner. "What have you been doing with them?" Elena blinked. "I do not understand. Something has changed. Something is different." Dr. Shaw gestured at the monitors. "I have seen thousands of patients. This kind of improvement does not happen on its own." Elena looked at the sleeping girls, then back at the doctor. "I have not done anything medical. I just stay with them, talk to them, tell them stories, love them. That is not medicine." Elena smiled gently. "Maybe some things are stronger than medicine." Dr. Shaw stared at her for a long moment. 30 years of medical training told her this was impossible. 30 years of science said there had to be a logical explanation. But the numbers did not lie. "I do not believe in miracles," the doctor said finally. "Then call it hope," Elena replied. "Hope can do extraordinary things." After Dr. Shaw left, Dominic stood by the window, watching his daughters sleep. Their breathing was steadier now. Their faces had more color. Elena came to stand beside him. "Do you really think they will get better?" he asked quietly. "I do not know." Elena's voice was honest. "But I know that when someone believes in you, you can do impossible things. Your daughters feel loved now. They feel safe. Maybe that is enough." Dominic said nothing, but her words settled into his chest like seeds in dark soil. That night, he stood alone on the balcony outside his bedroom. The city glittered below, cold and distant. The wind carried the smell of snow. For 11 months, Dominic Castellano had raged against fate. He had thrown money at doctors. He had threatened specialists. He had tried to bully death itself into submission. None of it had worked. But now, something was changing. Something he could not explain or control. He looked up at the stars. They seemed very far away. "If anyone is listening up there," he whispered, "please give my daughters more time." His voice broke. "I just learned how to love them again. Please do not take them away. Not yet." The wind shifted. The clouds parted slightly, revealing a sliver of moon. And somewhere in the darkness, Dominic could have sworn he felt someone listening. 10 days before Lucia and Sophia's 7th birthday, Elena found Mrs. Romano in the kitchen, reviewing grocery lists. "I want to throw a birthday party for the girls." Mrs. Romano's pen stopped moving. She looked up at Elena with wide eyes. "A birthday party? But they might not." She could not finish the sentence. "That is exactly why we need to do it," Elena said firmly. "They need something to look forward to, something to hope for." Mrs. Romano opened her mouth to respond, but a cold voice cut through the room. "Have you lost your mind?" Dominic stood in the doorway, his face dark with anger. "You want to throw a party for 2 children who are waiting to die?" Elena turned to face him. She did not flinch. "For 2 children who are still living, Dominic, this is cruelty." His voice rose, giving them false hope, making them excited for something they might never see. "Do you know what is truly cruel?" Elena stepped closer, treating them like they are already dead when they are still breathing, when their hearts are still beating. The kitchen fell silent. Mrs. Romano pressed herself against the counter, afraid to move. Dominic's jaw clenched. "You do not understand, I understand perfectly." Elena's voice cracked, but she pushed forward. "My son Marco died 12 days before his 5th birthday. 12 days. She paused, fighting to steady herself. "I did not plan a party. I did not buy presents. I told myself there was no point because he would not make it. I thought I was being realistic." A tear slipped down her cheek, but he was still alive for those 12 days, still hoping, still waiting for something good to happen, and I gave him nothing. Dominic stood frozen. "Now I live with that regret every single day," Elena continued. "I wish I had given him one perfect day, one moment of pure happiness before the end. But I was too scared, too focused on death to celebrate life." The anger drained from Dominic's face. In its place was something raw, vulnerable. "I do not want my daughters to be disappointed if they do not make it." Elena finished for him. "Then at least they will die while dreaming of something beautiful, instead of dying with nothing left to hope for." The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Dominic closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the hardness was gone. "Fine," he said quietly. "Do it. I will pay for everything." Elena nodded and turned toward the door. But before she left, she paused. "Dominic." He looked at her. "Money is not what they need most." "Then what is?" "You." Elena held his gaze. "You being present on their birthday, you being happy, you celebrating with them like nothing else matters." Dominic said nothing. "That is the greatest gift you can give your daughters. Not decorations, not cake, just you, fully there, loving them without fear." She walked out, leaving Dominic alone in the kitchen with Mrs. Romano. The old housekeeper wiped her eyes with her apron. "She is right, you know," Mrs. Romano said softly. Dominic stared at the empty doorway. "I know," he whispered. "God help me, I know." For the first time in 11 months, the Castellano mansion came alive. Mrs. Romano coordinated the staff with military precision. Maids hung streamers in the hallways. Guards carried boxes of decorations up from storage. The kitchen buzzed with activity as cooks prepared ingredients for the feast. Elena stood in the middle of the chaos, teaching everyone how to make a traditional Mexican piñata. "You fold the paper like this," she demonstrated, her hands moving quickly. "Then glue it here." Layer by layer. 2 housemaids watched intently, their fingers sticky with paste. "What should go inside?" one asked. "Candy. Small toys. Anything that makes children smile." In the medical wing, Lucia and Sophia sat propped up in their beds, their faces brighter than they had been in months. "What theme do you want for your party?" Elena asked them. Sophia's eyes lit up. "Rainbow. I want rainbows everywhere." Lucia shook her head. "No, princesses. We should be princesses." Elena pretended to think hard. "What about rainbow princesses?" Both girls gasped with delight. "Yes," Sophia clapped her hands. "Rainbow princess party. Now." Elena handed them paper and crayons. "You need to make invitations. Who will you invite?" Sophia chewed on her crayon thoughtfully. "Who should we invite?" Lucia grabbed a pink crayon and started drawing. "Daddy, we have to invite Daddy." They worked together on a single invitation, their small hands drawing wobbly hearts and crooked crowns. When they finished, Lucia wrote the words in careful, uneven letters. "Dear Daddy, please come to our birthday. Come early. Love, Lucia and Sophia." Elena carried the invitation to Dominic's office. He read it slowly. His fingers trembled against the paper. "They made this for me?" They did. Together. Dominic pressed the invitation against his chest and turned toward the window. Elena pretended not to notice him wiping his eyes. An hour later, Vince burst through the door. "Boss, we have a problem. The Petrov crew is moving on the west side. We need to respond now." Dominic looked up from his desk. The old fire flickered in his eyes for a moment. Then he looked at the invitation lying next to his phone. "Handle it tomorrow." Vince stared. "Tomorrow? Boss, this is business. I am busy today." Dominic held up the paper. "I have been invited to a birthday party. My first invitation from my daughters." Vince opened his mouth, closed it, nodded slowly. Understood, boss. After Vince left, Dominic walked down to the kitchen. Elena was measuring flour into a large bowl. What can I do? He asked. Elena looked up, surprised. Then she smiled and pushed a bag of flour toward him. Knead the dough. Your daughters want a cake made by their father. Dominic stared at the ingredients. He had never baked anything in his life. I do not know how. Then learn. 20 minutes later, the most feared man in Chicago stood covered in flour. It clung to his hair, his eyebrows, his expensive shirt. His hands were buried in sticky dough that refused to cooperate. Sophia peeked through the doorway and burst into giggles. Daddy looks like a snowman. Dominic looked down at himself. For a moment, his expression was unreadable. Then he laughed, a real laugh, deep and full. Mrs. Romano froze in the hallway, tears springing to her eyes. She had not heard that sound in 3 years. Elena watched from the doorway as Dominic lifted a flour-covered hand to wave at Sophia. He did not look like a crime lord anymore. He looked like a father, clumsy, imperfect, learning how to love, and that was more beautiful than anything Elena had ever seen. The mansion was transformed. Rainbow balloons floated from every doorway. Streamers wound around banisters and chandeliers. A banner stretched across the living room, painted in bright colors by shaky little hands. Happy birthday, Lucia and Sophia. In the kitchen, a 6-layer rainbow cake waited in the refrigerator, each layer a different color, each layer made with love and flower-covered chaos. Upstairs, the twins slept peacefully in their beds. For the first time in months, their faces held smiles even in sleep. They were dreaming of princesses and rainbows and a tomorrow worth waking up for. The house was quiet now. The staff had gone to bed. The guards kept their silent watch at the gates. Elena sat alone in the garden, wrapped in a thin blanket against the cold night air. Above her, stars scattered across the black sky like scattered diamonds. She did not hear Dominic approach until he spoke. You are not sleeping? Elena looked up. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain whether to stay or go. I was thinking about Marco, she said softly. The night before his birthday, I sat outside just like this, watching the stars, wondering if he would make it. Dominic hesitated, then sat down beside her on the stone bench. Tell me about him. Elena smiled, her eyes distant with memory. He loved trains. He could sit for hours watching them pass, just watching and counting. Her voice grew warm. Miguel used to take him to the train station every weekend. They would buy hot chocolate and sit on the platform until Marco fell asleep. Miguel was your husband? Yes. Elena nodded slowly. He was the man who saved me, who gave me a reason to believe in goodness again. She paused, her smile fading. He died when Marco was 2. An accident at the construction site where he worked. They said it was not the company's fault. We got nothing. Dominic said nothing. He just listened. Then Marco got sick. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. And I lost him too. The night wrapped around them, cold and quiet. Sometimes I wonder why I am still here, Elena continued. Why I keep going when everyone I loved is gone. Dominic turned to look at her. In the starlight, her face was pale but peaceful. Why do you keep going? Elena thought for a moment. For Diego, my little brother. He is in medical school now because I work. He will become a doctor someday. She paused. And because of the promise I made to Marco, she looked toward the mansion, where 2 little girls slept upstairs. And now, because of Lucia and Sophia, silence stretched between them. Dominic stared at the ground. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Isabella, my wife, she died on her way to buy Christmas presents for the girls. A drunk driver ran a red light. Elena turned to him. The car flipped 3 times, he continued. When they found her, she was wrapped around Lucia and Sophia, protecting them with her body. She saved them. She loved them so much, Elena said softly. And I was not there. Dominic's jaw tightened. I was handling business, always business. I told her I would go with her, but something came up. His voice cracked. Something always came up. Elena reached out and placed her hand over his. His skin was cold, his fingers tense. But you are here now, she said gently. That is what matters. Dominic looked at her hand on his. He did not pull away. They sat together in the darkness, 2 broken people connected by grief, 2 hearts that had known unbearable loss. And in the silence of the garden, beneath a sky full of stars, something quiet began to grow between them, something neither of them dared to name. The morning sun streamed through the windows as voices filled the medical wing. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Lucia's eyes flew open first, then Sophia's. They looked at each other in confusion, then toward the doorway where the entire household staff stood singing. Mrs. Romano led the chorus, her weathered face beaming. Behind her, maids and cooks and even the stern-faced guards joined in, their voices filling the room with warmth. And in the center stood Dominic, singing off-key, just like he said Isabella used to do. "Happy birthday, dear Lucia and Sophia. Happy birthday to you." The girls were lifted gently into wheelchairs decorated with rainbow ribbons. Elena pushed Sophia, while Dominic pushed Lucia, and together they descended to the living room. Sophia gasped when she saw it. Balloons everywhere, rainbow streamers cascading from the ceiling, flowers in every color imaginable, fairy lights twinkling like captured stars, and in the center, on a table draped in pink and purple, sat the 6-layer rainbow cake. "It is so beautiful." Sophia burst into tears. "So beautiful." Lucia grabbed her father's hand and squeezed tight. "Daddy, did you do all this?" Dominic knelt beside her wheelchair, his eyes soft. "I helped a little, but the person who did the most was Miss Elena." Both girls turned to Elena, their faces glowing with joy. "Thank you, Miss Elena." They reached out their thin arms, and Elena bent down to embrace them both. "Happy birthday, my sweet girls," she whispered. The party unfolded like a dream. Music played from speakers hidden among the decorations. Games were adapted for the wheelchairs. Laughter echoed through halls that had known only silence for nearly a year. Then came time for the cake. 7 candles flickered atop the rainbow layers, their small flames dancing in the air. Lucia reached out and took Sophia's hand. "Together?" she asked. Sophia nodded. "Together." Elena leaned close. "Make a wish, sweetheart. Both of you." The girls closed their eyes. Their lips moved silently. Then Lucia opened her eyes and looked directly at her father. "I wish Daddy would stay with us forever." Sophia nodded, her voice small but certain. "Me too. That is my wish too." Something shattered inside Dominic's chest. He fell to his knees beside their wheelchairs and pulled both daughters into his arms. His whole body shook as sobs tore from somewhere deep within him. "I am sorry," he choked out. "I am so sorry. I was scared. I ran away. I left you alone when you needed me most." His tears soaked into their thin hospital gowns. "But I love you. I love you more than anything in this world. More than my own life." Lucia reached up with her small hand and wiped the tears from his cheek. "It is okay, Daddy. Do not cry." Sophia pressed her face against his shoulder. "We love you too, Daddy. Please do not be sad." Across the room, Mrs. Romano sobbed openly into her apron. Vince turned away, pretending to adjust a balloon while wiping his eyes. Even the guards looked moved. Elena stood apart, tears streaming silently down her face. This was the moment she had fought for, the moment this broken family needed. They blew out the candles together, they cut the cake, they celebrated. That night, Lucia and Sophia fell asleep in their father's arms, their faces peaceful and content. Elena stood in the doorway, watching. A single tear slipped down her cheek as she whispered into the darkness. "Marco, my son." Mama kept her promise. She turned away, her heart full. She did not know that in just a few hours, everything would fall apart. 2 days after the birthday, the worst blizzard in a decade descended upon Chicago. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets. Wind howled around the mansion like a wounded animal. By evening, the drifts had reached the first-floor windows, trapping everyone inside. Then the power went out. The backup generator hummed to life, but its sound was weak, strained. Mrs. Romano reported that it had enough fuel for maybe 8 hours if they were careful. The medical equipment ran on battery backup. The monitors beeped steadily in the darkness, their green lights the only illumination in the girls' room. Elena sat between the 2 beds, watching over her charges. Lucia slept fitfully, murmuring in her dreams. Sophia seemed peaceful, her breathing slow and even. Until midnight, Elena noticed it first. Sophia's face was flushed. Her breathing had changed, becoming rapid and shallow. She pressed her hand to the child's forehead and felt fire. "Dominic!" Elena screamed. "Something is wrong with Sophia." Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Dominic burst through the door, his face wild with fear. Sophia was convulsing. Her small body shook violently, her eyes rolled back in her head. "Call the doctor," Dominic shouted. Mrs. Romano appeared in the doorway, her face ashen. "The phones are dead. No signal. The roads are completely blocked." Sophia stopped shaking. For one terrible moment, everything went still. Then the monitor flatlined. "No!" Dominic lunged toward the bed, but Elena pushed him aside. Let me. She positioned her hands on Sophia's tiny chest and began compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her voice was steady, but her heart was shattering. Breathe, baby, breathe. Dominic fell to his knees beside the bed, grabbing Sophia's limp hand. Sophia, please, do not leave Daddy. Please. Lucia woke screaming. Sophia, wake up. Sister, please wake up. Elena kept pushing. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Sweat dripped down her face despite the cold. Come on, sweetheart. Come back to us. 3 minutes. The monitor still showed a flat line. Elena's arms burned. Her shoulders ached. But she did not stop. Marco, she whispered, so quietly only the angels could hear. My son, please help me. Do not let another child leave this world. Not tonight. 4 minutes. Her arms felt like lead. Her vision blurred with tears. And then a cough. Tiny, weak, but real. The monitor beeped once, twice, then settled into a rhythm. Sophia was breathing. Dominic collapsed against the bed, sobbing into the sheets. His whole body shook with relief and terror. Elena sat back, her legs giving out beneath her. She slumped to the floor, trembling uncontrollably. Her lungs burned. Her hands would not stop shaking. But Sophia was alive. Lucia crawled out of her bed and stumbled to her sister's side, clutching her hand. Sophia? Sophia, can you hear me? Sophia's eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused at first, drifting. Then they found Elena. Miss Elena. Her voice was barely a whisper. I saw a boy. Elena froze. Her heart stopped beating. What did you see, sweetheart? A boy. He had curly hair. He was smiling. Sophia's eyes were distant, seeing something beyond this world. He told me to come back. He said his mama needed me. Elena's chest cracked open. She gathered Sophia into her arms and wept. Deep, shaking sobs that came from the very bottom of her soul. Marco. Her son had sent Sophia back to her. Her promise had reached him, even beyond the grave, and he had answered. In the days following that terrible night, Sophia slowly stabilized. Her fever broke. Her breathing steadied. Color returned to her cheeks. But Elena was fading. She hid it well at first. The dark circles under her eyes could be blamed on sleepless nights. The trembling in her hands could be dismissed as stress. The way she gripped furniture when she walked went unnoticed, until she collapsed. Mrs. Romano found her on the kitchen floor, unconscious, her face white as paper. Get the doctor, she screamed. Someone help! Dominic was in the room within seconds. He lifted Elena in his arms and carried her to the nearest bedroom, her body frighteningly light against his chest. The private physician arrived within the hour. He examined Elena behind closed doors while Dominic paced the hallway like a caged animal. Finally, the doctor emerged. Well? Dominic demanded. The doctor's face was grim. Severe anemia, malnutrition, complete exhaustion. Her body has been running on nothing for weeks, possibly months. Dominic stared at him. That is impossible. I pay her well. Very well. She sends almost everything to Mexico, for her brother's education. The doctor closed his bag. She barely eats. She sleeps maybe 3 hours a night. She has been destroying herself to care for your daughters. Dominic felt the floor shift beneath him. He walked into Elena's room without knocking. She lay on the bed, her face pale against the white pillows, her eyes closed. Why? Elena's eyes fluttered open. She looked at him without surprise. Why what? Why would you do this to yourself? His voice cracked. Starve yourself? Work yourself to death? Elena smiled weakly. Because Diego needs to finish school. He is going to be a doctor. He is going to save children like Marco. And my daughters? They needed me. Her voice was simple, matter of fact. So I stayed. You almost died. Dominic's hands clenched into fists. Last night, when Sophia stopped breathing, you saved her. But who would have saved you? Elena closed her eyes. It does not matter. Sophia is alive. I am alive. That is enough. Dominic sank into the chair beside her bed. He pressed his palms against his eyes. You are the most foolish person I have ever met, he said roughly. And the bravest. Elena laughed, though it came out as little more than a breath. Thank you, I think. Dominic lowered his hands and looked at her. Really looked. From now on, you eat every meal with the family. No exceptions. No skipping. Dominic. And I am paying Diego's tuition. All of it. Until he graduates. Elena's eyes widened. I cannot accept that. It is not a request. His voice left no room for argument. It is an order. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Elena nodded. Fine. But you should know, I did not do any of this for money. I know. Dominic's voice softened. That is exactly why you are the only person I trust. He stood and walked to the door. But before he left, he turned back. In the fading afternoon light, Elena looked fragile, delicate, like a flower that had bloomed in impossible conditions. And Dominic realized something that shook him to his core. He did not just feel grateful to her anymore. He needed her, in a way he had not needed anyone since Isabella died. 2 months passed like a dream. Spring arrived in Chicago, melting the snow and bringing warmth back to the world. But the greatest transformation happened inside the Castellano mansion. Dr. Shaw stood in the medical wing, staring at her tablet in disbelief. I have no medical explanation for this. Dominic stepped closer. What do you mean? The cancer is in remission. Both of them. She shook her head slowly. Complete remission. Their blood work is nearly normal. I have never seen anything like it. Lucia sat up in bed, her cheeks pink with health. Soft black fuzz covered her scalp where hair was beginning to grow back. Does that mean we are not sick anymore? She asked. Doctor, Shaw smiled, her eyes glistening. It means you are getting better, sweetheart. Much better. Sophia was already out of bed. She took 3 wobbly steps toward Elena, then 4, then 5. Look, Miss Elena, I am walking. Elena caught her in her arms, laughing and crying at the same time. I see you, my brave girl. I see you. Within weeks, the hospital beds were removed. The medical equipment was packed away. The room became a playroom again, filled with toys and books and sunlight. Lucia ran through the garden, chasing butterflies, her laughter echoing across the grounds. Sophia followed more slowly, but she followed. Every day, she grew stronger. Elena ate every meal with the family now, as Dominic had ordered. Mrs. Romano made sure her plate was always full. Eat, the old housekeeper would say. You are too thin. Eat more. Elena would smile and obey. One afternoon, her phone rang. She saw the number and her heart leaped. Diego? Elena, her brother's voice was bright with excitement. I got accepted. The medical program. Full scholarship. Tears streamed down Elena's face. Oh, Diego, I am so proud of you. It is because of you, sister. Everything I have is because of you. His voice softened. I am going to become a doctor. I am going to save children like Marco. I promise. Elena could not speak. She just held the phone and wept. Dominic watched from across the room. When she hung up, he handed her a handkerchief without a word. He had changed too. The cold, distant crime lord was gone. In his place was a father who read bedtime stories and made pancakes on Sunday mornings. Family first. He told Vince one day when business called. Always family first. Vince had simply nodded. He understood. One afternoon, Lucia climbed into Elena's lap and looked up at her with serious eyes. Miss Elena, will you stay with us forever? Elena glanced toward the doorway. Dominic stood there, watching, waiting. I will stay as long as you need me, she said softly. Sophia ran over and wrapped her arms around Elena's neck. We will always need you, she whispered. Always. That evening, Dominic found Elena in the garden. She sat on the stone bench where they had talked the night before the birthday, her face turned toward the stars. What are your plans for the future? He asked. Elena shook her head. I do not dare think that far ahead. Dominic sat beside her. Slowly, carefully, he took her hand in his. If you could choose anything, he said quietly, what would you want? Elena was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. A family. I want a family. Dominic did not respond. He simply held her hand tighter. And in the darkness of the garden, both of them began to hope for something they had thought was lost forever. 1 year had passed since Elena Vasquez walked through the gates of the Castellano mansion. 1 year since she entered a house waiting to die and filled it with light. Lucia and Sophia were unrecognizable from the skeletal children she had first met. Their hair had grown back, thick and dark and shining. Their cheeks were round and rosy. They ran through the halls, laughing and playing, full of life that no one had dared to hope for. Dr. Shaw delivered the final verdict on a sunny afternoon. Complete remission, she announced, her voice thick with emotion. No traces of cancer. It is nothing short of a miracle. Dominic organized a celebration. Not a party for the girls this time, but a gathering to honor the woman who had saved them all. The dining room glowed with candles. Flowers adorned every surface. The entire household staff attended, along with a few trusted associates who had never seen their boss smile before this year. When dinner was finished, Dominic stood. The room fell silent. 1 year ago, he began, his voice rough. I was a failure, a coward. I was so afraid of losing my daughters that I abandoned them when they needed me most. He looked across the table at Elena. Then a woman walked into my home. She had nothing, no money, no power, no reason to care about strangers. His voice cracked, but she had something I had lost, hope, and she gave it freely, even when I did not deserve it. Elena's eyes glistened with tears. Elena, you saved my daughters. You saved me, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of what you gave us. The room erupted in applause. Mrs. Romano sobbed openly. Even Vince wiped his eyes. Later that night, after the guests had left and the girls were asleep, Dominic found Elena in the garden. She sat on their bench, looking up at the stars. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. Elena turned to him. For what? For every harsh word, every cold look, every time I treated you like you did not matter. Elena shook her head. You do not need to apologize. You were in pain. You understood that. You understood everything. Dominic's voice dropped. And I do not want to lose you. What are you saying? He took her hands in his. They were warm now, no longer the frozen, trembling hands of a woman starving herself for others. I am saying that you have become family. To me, to my daughters. He paused, searching for words. I want you to stay. Not as a caregiver, not as an employee, but as... He could not finish. Elena reached up and touched his face. Her palm rested against his cheek, gentle and sure. I came here to keep a promise to my son, she whispered. But I stayed because of you, because of Lucia and Sophia, because this is where I belong. Dominic leaned down. Their lips met in the darkness. It was not a kiss of passion or urgency. It was a kiss of healing, of two broken people finding each other after years of wandering alone. When they finally pulled apart, Elena rested her head against his shoulder. Above them, the stars burned bright against the velvet sky, and somewhere beyond those stars, two small angels watched over them. Marco, who had sent Sophia back to his mother. Isabella, who had loved her family enough to die for them. Both of them smiling, both of them at peace, because the people they had left behind had finally found their way home. 5 years had transformed the Castellano mansion, where silence once suffocated every room, laughter now echoed through the halls, where darkness had crept into every corner, sunlight poured through open windows, where death had waited patiently, life now flourished. Lucia and Sophia were 11 years old, healthy, radiant. Their long dark hair flowed down their backs as they raced through the garden, chasing each other with water balloons. In the kitchen, Elena stood at the counter, carefully spreading frosting on a towering birthday cake. On her left hand, a diamond ring sparkled beside a simple gold wedding band. Mrs. Elena Castellano. That was her name now. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind. Dominic rested his chin on her shoulder. Is the cake ready yet? Elena smiled. Almost, Mr. Castellano. Be patient. He kissed her cheek and stole a fingerful of frosting. Dominic, he grinned like a mischievous boy and retreated before she could swat him with her spatula. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Mama, I want to help. Lucia burst into the kitchen, her face flushed with excitement. Mama, even after 4 years of hearing it, the word still made Elena's heart swell. Me too. Sophia appeared behind her sister. I want to put the candles on. Elena handed them each a task, watching as they carefully arranged 12 candles on the rainbow layers. Today was their 12th birthday, a day that once seemed impossible. The doorbell rang, and Elena's heart leaped. She ran to the entrance and threw open the door. Diego stood on the threshold, taller and broader than she remembered. He wore a suit and carried a small suitcase. His eyes were bright with tears. Sister, Elena pulled him into her arms. Diego, my little brother. He held her tight. I graduate next year. I'm going to be a doctor. Elena pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. Marco would be so proud of you. I am doing it for him, Diego whispered. And for you, for everything you sacrificed. In the living room, 2 photographs sat on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. One showed Marco, forever 4 years old, his smile bright as sunshine. The other showed Isabella, beautiful and serene, frozen in time. We do not forget, Dominic had said when they placed the photos there. We carry them with us. After the cake and presents, the family gathered in the garden. A small tree grew in the corner, its branches reaching toward the sky. Beneath it stood a simple wooden marker. For Marco and Isabella, the ones who led us home. Lucia and Sophia knelt beside the tree and placed fresh flowers at its base. "Thank you, Marco," Sophia said softly, "for bringing Mama Elena to us." "Thank you, Isabella," Lucia added, "for watching over us." Elena watched her daughters with tears streaming down her face. Her daughters, that was what they were now. Hers. She knelt beside the tree and pressed her palm against the warm earth. "My son," she whispered. "I kept my promise. I did not let them die alone, and they gave me something I thought I had lost forever." The wind stirred the branches above her. "They gave me a family." Dominic's hand found her shoulder. Lucia and Sophia pressed close on either side. Diego stood behind them, his presence solid and warm. The sky above Chicago stretched endless and blue, and there, beneath the tree planted for two angels, stood a family made whole, not by blood, but by love, by sacrifice, by a promise kept across the divide between life and death. That evening, Elena and Dominic sat together on the balcony, watching the sun paint the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and crimson. The sounds of laughter drifted up from the garden below, where Lucia and Sophia played with Diego, their joy echoing across the grounds. Elena leaned against her husband's shoulder. "If someone had told me 5 years ago that my life would look like this," she smiled, unable to finish. Dominic wrapped his arm around her. "I know. I thought I did not deserve happiness anymore. I thought that part of my life was over." Elena took his hand and pressed it to her heart. "Everyone deserves to be loved, Dominic. Everyone deserves a second chance." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars slowly appear. "Marco, Isabella," Elena whispered to the sky, "thank you for guiding us home. This story carries lessons that reach far beyond its pages. Suffering is not the end. It is often the beginning of healing." Elena lost everything, yet she transformed her pain into purpose. Dominic hid from grief until he learned that running only deepens the wound. Hope is more powerful than any medicine. Doctors gave Lucia and Sophia weeks to live, but love, presence, and belief gave them a future. Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by those who choose to stay. Elena was not born a Castellano, but she became the heart of that family through sacrifice and devotion. Never treat the living as though they are already gone. The dying do not need our fear. They need our presence, our courage, our refusal to give up before they do. Love arrives when we open our hearts. Dominic built walls around himself for years. Only when he let those walls crumble did he find something worth living for. Loss can become the motivation to save others. Marco's death gave Elena a sacred mission. Isabella's sacrifice reminded Dominic what truly mattered. Presence is the greatest gift we can offer. Not money, not solutions. Simply being there, fully and completely, for those who need us. Above the Chicago skyline, 2 stars burned brighter than the rest. Perhaps they were Marco and Isabella, watching over the family they had helped create. Perhaps they were smiling, knowing that the love they left behind had blossomed into something beautiful. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story that speaks to the soul. And please, leave a comment below. Tell us, have you ever been saved by someone when you thought all was lost? Have you ever found family in unexpected places? We would love to hear your story, your feelings, the whispers of your heart. We believe every person watching this has their own journey, their own struggles, their own hopes. And we believe that you deserve love, happiness, and a second chance at whatever dreams you carry. May you have good health and joyful days ahead. May peace fill your heart and light guide your path. Thank you for spending this time with us. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next video. Above the city, the stars continued their silent watch. Marco and Isabella looked down at the family gathered below. Their son, their daughters, the woman who had kept her promise, the man who had learned to love again. They smiled, because they knew the truth that only angels understand. Love never dies. It simply changes form. And the people they had loved were finally, beautifully, home.